love what you're doing right now. Don't complain. It's a hard space to be in, but hang in there. You're gonna come out soon with flying colors. And I think the most important thing is to know what you love, right? And I would definitely recommend PhD students of today to sort of go do more internships, right?
You're welcome to the PhD Talk Show at BioPatrika, a platform that aims to bring science to the society by speaking with experts in from all fields of science. My name is Patience Asanga, and I'll be your host. Today we have on the show Dr. Gayathri Raghupathy, VP Scientific and Business Strategy at Cognitic.
Hi, Patience. Thanks for having me.
Okay, you did a BTech in biotechnology and then you went ahead for a PhD to get your PhD in molecular cell and developmental biology, and then you assumed your current role as the VP scientific and business strategy at Cognitic. This seemed like a very interesting journey. Could you please walk us through it?
Yeah, sure. Happy to kind of like walk you through my career trajectory so far. So after I finished my BTech in biotechnology in India, I recognized that I wanted to study more, go seek higher education opportunities, especially outside of India, just for exposure and the fact that biotech was, at that time, the path was either we go to Europe or America to kind of like understand more about biotech industry and to kind of like go deeper into some of the biological concepts. So that was one of the reason why I did my master's in biotech at University of Texas at Dallas right after my undergrad. And it was a big transition for me to go from India to Texas. One common thing was both hot weather areas, but very different, right? And it was a great learning experience for me in terms of both culturally and to also learn about how the system works here in a different country than where I'm coming from, and to understand more about biotechnology and to go deep into understanding some of the scientific concepts and how it applies in a real life setting as well. So it was a lot of learning for me. And I also sought internships to sort of understand more about applications in a real situation. And I also sought opportunities to work in labs so that I would get like more hands-on bench science experience. So I always was conscious about seeking options and opportunities outside of the classroom. So that way I knew how to do approach lab experiments and also understand how the industry operates. And after that, I did work as a research associate for a biotech company in Austin, Texas. And that truly what really kind of like triggered me and made me really interested in going and doing my PhD. So at that time, I was working as a research associate at this biotech company called X Biotech, where we were working on developing an cancer drug. And my role was a lot around like protein purification and doing some sort of like manufacturing related experiments to see the quality of the product that was coming out of the bioreactor. So for me, the aspects of how this molecule was developed was what I was super keen about. I was working more downstream, but I really wanted to understand like what led to the development of this drug molecule that I'm working on, and what are the different pathways it connects, and how does this play a role in potentially sort of like, they were doing experiments at that time, and potentially how's the efficacy of some of these drugs set up. And I just really wanted to understand things at the more fundamental cell and molecular level of this drug and how it relates to the pathways inside a patient's body, so to speak. So that what really kind of like sparked my interest in going to do my PhD. And I was working with that time with senior scientists and head of R&D, and I would have a lot of chat with them because they had been through the PhD path, and that's what led to them to lead a scientific division within the biotech company. So I would have a lot of conversations with them, sort of like informational interview, we could say, to really understand, hey, like, what was your career path, similar to how the conversation we are having right now. So I really learned from them and made a decision that, yeah, this is the right next step for me. And that's what led me to do my PhD. And during my PhD as well, like when I started doing my PhD, I was so sure that I was going to be a bench scientist and go back to the biotech industry and be a bench scientist again and do some R&D related work. That was a mindset with which I started my PhD. But soon in my third or fourth year, I kind of like pivoted from that mindset, and I started seeking opportunities outside of academia, not necessarily within bench science. And the reason why I did that pivot was mainly to do with the fact about exposure to a lot of career opportunities that exist outside of academia. So my PhD was in New York City. I was doing my PhD at CUNY Hunter College, and New York City was like a really nice place and exposure for me because there are so many similar universities there, so many biotech related organizations and biopharma related organizations, both student and industry organizations that exist. So I had a chance to go to a lot of career panels and a lot of conferences and seminars where I started meeting people or like sitting through talks where people with a similar background like me were doing a lot of interesting things outside of academia. So that kind of like really got me interested on, okay, I want to like go deeper into and understand what exists outside of bench science. And also keep in mind that at the same time, I was doing some experiments which were not necessarily going in the right way. I was getting like a little sort of like a research fatigue at that point. So I was like, I want quick and tangible, impactful success out of what I'm doing. So I think it kind of like coincided with the fact that, yeah, I think I'm sort of done with bench science right now. What else can I do? And that kind of like coincided with all this exposure that was happening at the same time. And one thing that I did hear from people also was that, you want to maybe try out some internships or some sort of training to understand if that's truly what you want before you just graduate and just go find a job outside of academia. So I made very conscious efforts in the middle of my PhD while I was doing bench experiments and teaching as well to make sure that I sought some internship opportunities where I could learn what does it truly mean to be doing projects or doing a work or a job outside of academia. So two key internships that I did was sort of served as a reassurance that this is what I want to do. And those were, I did an internship on business development. So I was a BD intern at the New York Genome Center. And that was a great way for me to learn how you have your understanding of scientific and technological concepts, but at the same time, you're trying to translate that into business and or try to even set up a business, right? So that was a great way for me to like understand what does it mean to be, kind of like transition from science into the business of science. So that internship was great for me in that exposure. And the second one was I did an internship also on being an analyst, so I could figure out like if consulting was the right kind of space for me. Again, I love that process of working with a biopharma company and kind of like working with them in translating, going through drug pipeline and understanding, what could potentially be spun off to start a new biotech. That really was the product. That really was a project that I was working on at that time. So those two internships I thoroughly enjoyed. I like had so much fun doing that. And the fact that I was working with people coming from various background in terms of I was working with a lawyer one day, I would be working with somebody who was coming from a medical background. So it was a very interdisciplinary kind of like experience that I had through both these internships, which really made me feel that this is what I want to do. I want to be outside of bench science and I want to be in a really agile, startup-y kind of environment, where I can have a lot of fun in talking about science, doing science, but not necessarily as an experiment, but in a very different sense. So that led me to, choose that kind of a path after I graduated. And that's what I did when I went to a ad agency or a medical education agency called BGB in New York, where I was a medical writer. And there, again, it was great amount of learning. Was a great launch pad for me to understand how a pharma company functions and what are the
I
various.
it's quite interesting how you've touched virtually all aspects of most sectors. You've been in science, you've done business, and you've done art. That is science communication. That's actually very versatile. That's a very versatile nature. And what is it like working in the industry as a scientist? What does it feel like as compared to being in academia? How does it feel like being a scientist in the industry?
Yeah, so I think industry is extremely, I think, extremely fast paced. And everything you do needs to have a strategy, a project, and a plan to execute it properly. Whereas in academia, it could be different, right? Yes, things are fast paced, but I could be sitting on a project where I'm doing a research, for months and not getting the right data, but keep on repeating it. But in a business setting, everything really translates to what revenues is going to bring to my company, right? And how does this satisfy the needs of the clients or the client goals and the client projects. So it's very strategically and you have a clear path and a clear vision of how and what you need to do at what point of time, and there is a dedicated timeline associated with it too. And another key change that I had to learn to adapt to was to not go into rabbit holes and to really function efficiently with very limited knowledge, right? So as a research scientist, we tend to sometimes really go deep into a concept and know everything about everything, right? Because that's really what PhD training does, right? You go into a concept, you bury yourself deep into it, you understand everything about that molecule or that whatever you're studying, and you're the expert in that particular area and topic. So when you go into industry, you kind of have that, muscle memory or something like that, where you're inclined to do the same, right? So that was a big learning that I had to do to be more efficient and do more with less information. And to be very strategic and be fast with what I was doing, to be able to multitask and be fast and bring an idea to a product very quickly. So that's something that I had to kind of like shift my mindset around, how to get things done very quickly and not try to go way too deep into something unnecessarily and sort of like end up with a decision fatigue or information fatigue at that point, right? So those are things that had to be a big learning for me. And also another interesting thing was how important it is to be collaborative and how especially when you interact with interdisciplinary when you're in an interdisciplinary environment. Like when I was at the SciComm agency, we had to work with copywriters, we had to work with graphic designers, and also with editorial team who are very, focused on the grammar, the language, and the sentence structure of things, right? Not necessarily all of them coming from a heavy scientific academic background. So it was important to sort of be able to work with a team of people.
I think you did a little bit of medical writing, right?
Yes,
So
that's correct.
what happened to that dream? Because I'm a lover of science writing. So what happened
Yeah,
to that
science
dream?
writing is fun. So science writing is a lot of fun, right? And medical writing was really, where I was at right after PhD at BGB. That really served as a good launch pad for me. I was there for a little, like close to a year, but still within that 1 year, I learned so much about the pharma industry, so much about the divisions within pharma industry, or how they talk about a particular product to patients or physicians, right? So those were my key learnings from my work as a scientific writer. So there were two things that happened which kind of like made me to pivot from that kind of setting. One was that was the time when I started reading a lot and falling in love with artificial intelligence and machine learning technology, and how that has an impact in pharma, and how so many other industries like retail and commercial have been so quick to pick up and apply the technology, but pharma is still in a learning mode. And I wouldn't say a learning mode, is much more slower to adapt and put that into practice than those other, let's take an Amazon or companies like that, right? So that really was, I started reading more about it and understanding more about the AI in pharma and where are the avenues that it could be applicable. Simultaneously, I also was working in a heavily, very, very fast-paced environment where I would have to clock in at like, let's say 8:30 in the morning and work till like 7 in the night. At the same time, I was also a new mom. So working like 12 hours a day was not something. And this was, again, at a time pre-COVID, when virtual work style was not a thing. You would have to like really go ask permission to work from home and things like that. It just wasn't a right fit for me as a new mom, like to have to work 12 hours. I wish things wouldn't be that way where you have to change your career because you're going through motherhood. But at that time, it just seemed like that just wasn't a right fit based on the lifestyle that I was looking for, where I could equally spend more time with my daughter and also do some great work at the company. So it just wasn't a right fit for me company wise. Or so that, and at the same time, as I was mentioning about my interest in AI, was when I came across, just like casual Googling, I came across Cognitic. And when I just sent them an email, said that, hey, are you, you're just looking for job opportunities, etc. So we just got
You
into
found your
conversation.
fit.
I found my fit and very happy. And
What's
it's
your
that.
day like? What's your normal day like?
So a lot of meetings, a lot of talking. So every day is just a lot of, at this point of time, I'm working a lot with the upper management in terms of like coming up with a lot of ideas. We talk about a lot of strategy, a lot of ideas on how do we keep our innovation going, and at the same time, how do we make sure our current users. So we have a product like a platform, and a lot of pharma users use our platform to understand about drug development. So it's really important for us to keep, keep our keep making sure that we're doing a very customer centric sort of like work in making sure our users are happy with the information. So there are two main aspects to what I do: the science, the business, and strategy. Right. So the science. So I lead the scientific team. So I need to make sure that all the scientific content in our platform is up to date and the data quality is good. And what are all the new areas that we need to approach, right? And how do we evolve our product in a way that it's much more impactful and different from the competition that we are at. So a lot around the science and the product strategy. And the second main thing is business and also marketing. So those are the kind of areas where I'm always like thinking about it, like kind of like wearing multiple hats, because we're a startup. So it's really important that we're kind of like, all of us are all rounders in our company, where one day we're talking about science, other day we're talking about how do we set up a LinkedIn ad so that people understand about our product. So it's a lot of meetings that I go through and a lot of strategy discussions that I go through, and pitching our product to new potential users in new pharma companies. And also making sure the most important aspect of my job is to make sure that I am doing well as a mentor for my team, and and also bring in good leadership into the company. So those are things that I'm learning as I go, because academia taught me everything about science, and all my everyday experiences are teaching about business. But being a good mentor and being a good leader, it's just not something you read in a book. So I'm always watching for real experiences and learning from other people about how they are a good mentor or a good leader. So I'm trying to like evolve myself into somebody who can be a good mentor, and I want to be a good mentee as well. And how can I be the best form of leader that I can be to my maximum potential?
That's good to know. So it may seem as though you are doing more of the business than science in industry. Is it always like this for everybody, or is just your choice?
Um, it's my choice. I mean, I cannot think like it's a combination. It's my choice, but I also think like, when you start right out of academia, you'll still be very close to the science, right? But as you start growing into your role, you sort of come out of that analyst mode, or like, very close to science mode, and you start evolving into your role, which is much more patient centric or physician centric or business centric or product centric, where you're not like maybe sitting and reading a PubMed article necessarily, but still in a way you are connected with science. So even though I call it business side of things, but it's still very closely relevant to the science, because I still, for example, our oncology platform, I need to understand really well about like what are all the top oncology drugs, what is emerging right now, which targets are emerging, let's say what type of technologies are really changing the dynamics of the space. So there is a lot of research and learning that I do still in a way to keep me current about what's going on and what's important for the users. But how you translate that knowledge is not necessarily through data analysis or experiments, right? It's just like you're taking the knowledge that you're learning from a scientific space, but just using it, translating it into a different area, such as business or user experience in my case, or marketing, etc.
Thank you so much for all you have shared. What advice would you give to someone that's considering a degree, a PhD degree?
Love what you're doing right now. Don't complain. It's a hard space to be in, but hang in there. You're gonna come out soon with flying colors. And I think the most important thing is to know what you love, right? And I would definitely recommend PhD students of today to sort of go do more internships, right? I know we can always make excuses around, I have a million experiments to do, I can't make the time for it, my professor is going to be upset, or my university wouldn't let me, right? Don't take no for an answer. Just if you have decided that I want to go outside of academia, really go get some mini trainings, which will reassure you, make you feel that this is what you want to do. That's one thing, right? And the second thing is sort of like what you're doing, right? You're doing things outside of your regular day to day, so which is a great thing. So I think these sort of like trainings and internships and extracurriculars are super important, and try to do it like more strategically, right? If you think you want to go into the consulting industry, try to take consulting internships, try to solve consulting cases, etc. If you want to go in writing, try to set up a blog or write LinkedIn posts or whatever it is, if you're not able to find the right internship opportunity. And I think most importantly is networking. So networking is so critical. The goal of networking a lot of times gets misunderstood, right? Like even I had that misunderstanding initially. So when I was networking, I would always think that, oh, maybe that's the next person who's going to help me find my job, right? So it's not about that. It's really about what can I learn when I talk to somebody, right? Maybe they're going to share me those pearls of wisdoms and you didn't even know, or you were asking for it, right? So to capture it in the moment and to learn from them and to keep that connection going. And I think it's so important. I've did so much networking, and I think when that's one of the areas where being in the right city kind of helps. Like there would be so many networking events all the time in New York. So I would meet a lot of people, connect with them on LinkedIn, ask some questions, or they would connect you with somebody else, right? So, and just networking is important, not just so somebody can get you a job, but so you can learn from them and maybe you'll be helpful to them in some way too. And always remember to pay it forward. Once you've hit your goals and you're outside of academia and gone to the industry, it's always also good to kind of like, do the same for emerging PhD candidates and other people.
Okay, thank you so much for coming into the show today. I've really learned a lot, and I believe the viewers also have benefited from the experiences you've shared. Thank you. So we are going to call it a day now. Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a great
patience.
day.